Saturday morning at Willow Creek Country Club meant one thing: Dad's weekly ritual of subtle humiliation disguised as golf. For almost a year now, I'd managed to dodge his invitations with excuses ranging from busy week to looming deadlines to I think I'm allergic to rich people before noon. But today he was relentless. "Just come, Alexis," Dad had pleaded over breakfast. "It's only 9 holes, and Harrington keeps asking about you. It could be good networking." Networking. Right. So here I was, standing on the first tee at 8:10 a.m., wearing khaki shorts and a polo shirt, like every other accidental disappointment wandering through a country club on a Saturday, trying to blend in with men who shaped half the city's economy. Dad was already lining up his shot, and I could feel the conversation hanging in the air like a bad omen. His prestigious foursome was approaching: Mr. Harrington from Harrington Financial, Mr. Patel, who owned 3 downtown tech complexes, and Dr. Green, a heart surgeon with enough plaques and awards to fill a museum. "Gentlemen," Dad said proudly, gesturing toward me as they walked up, "you remember my daughter, Alexis." Mr. Harrington, a silver-haired, expensive watch kind of man, gave me a polite smile. "Of course. How's the job search going, dear?" There it was, the question that had been haunting Dad's Saturdays for months. The same question Dad answered before I could open my mouth. "She's taking her time, being selective about her next opportunity." Selective. That was Dad's elegant way of saying still unemployed. Mr. Patel nodded sympathetically as he tightened his golf glove. "A smart approach. The economy's rough on recent graduates." Recent graduates. I was 32, with a doctorate from Caltech. But to these men, I was still the quiet kid who used to hide behind my father at holiday parties. I began, but Dad placed a gentle but firm hand on my shoulder. "Alexis is doing some consulting work," he said, smiling nervously, "keeping her options open." Consulting work. That was certainly one way to describe running a clean tech fusion company poised to reshape the nation's entire energy infrastructure. But sure, consulting. Dr. Green paused mid-practice swing to join the conversation. "You know," he said thoughtfully, "if you're interested in healthcare administration, I have connections at St. David's. Good benefits, steady work." "That's very generous," I replied carefully, "but I'm focused on the clean energy sector." "Energy?" Mr. Harrington's eyebrows lifted. "Tough field to break into without connections. Very technical. Tons of established players. Maybe start with something more entry-level first." Entry-level. This man was giving career advice to someone who held 12 patents in fusion storage systems and had negotiated the second-largest federal renewable energy contract in U.S. history. But yes, entry-level. "She's always been interested in science," Dad said, his voice thick with that familiar shade of disappointment. "We're hoping she finds something stable while she figures out her long-term goals." Long-term goals. As if building a groundbreaking energy technology company was a hobby I'd get tired of. Mr. Patel lined up his shot. "The key is managing expectations," he said with a knowing nod. "Young people get these grand ambitions about changing the world, but you have to be realistic." Realistic. My grand ambition currently had investors begging me to expand production lines faster than my engineers could design them. But yes, realism. "Exactly," Dr. Green agreed. "Find something steady, build experience, maybe pursue your passions as a side hobby later on." As side hobby. My hobby had just been featured in Wired magazine, but fine. "Alexis understands all that," Dad said quickly. "She's exploring her options." I could almost feel the weight he'd been carrying. For months, he'd been trying to protect his reputation among friends whose children had normal success. Mine wasn't normal, and because I didn't flaunt it, Dad assumed I was struggling. "Another thing that helps," Mr. Harrington said, reaching into his pocket for his phone, "is keeping your LinkedIn updated. I looked at yours after your father mentioned your job hunt. Honestly, it's pretty bare." My LinkedIn profile, the one I deliberately kept empty because every time I updated it, I got swamped with investment pitches and keynote invitations. I'll keep that in mind. I said. And consider relocating, Dr. Green added. Energy jobs are really centralized in Houston or Denver. Hard to build a career working from your laptop at home. From my laptop at home. You mean the laptop connected to the 40,000 square foot research facility I bought and converted into a fusion testing lab? Yes, that laptop. She doesn't live at home, Dad corrected quickly. She has her own place. It's just modest. Modest. Dad's diplomatic replacement word for embarrassingly simple compared to everyone else's kids. Nothing wrong with modest, Dr. Green said warmly. But eventually, your lifestyle should reflect your ambition. Image matters in business. Image matters. Last Thursday, I sat across from the U.S. Secretary of Energy in a closed-door policy meeting. But yes, let's talk image. The real key is networking, Harrington said, warming to the conversation. Can't rely on applications. You need face-to-face connections. Like today, Dad said hopefully. Exactly the kind of networking Alexis should be doing. Mr. Patel suddenly brightened. You know, he said, I have a niece who went through something similar. Took 2 years to land her first real job in marketing. Patience is key. Patience. I had spent 3 years designing a fusion grid system in stealth mode while everyone assumed I was wasting my degree. So yes, patience. The important thing, Dr. Green said as we moved to the second T, is not letting pride interfere with taking practical opportunities. I see young people reject good entry-level jobs because they feel overqualified. Overqualified. 3 months ago, I spoke at the Global Fusion Summit, but maybe I was being too picky. Alexis isn't like that, Dad insisted, though his tone wavered. She's always been practical. Yes, practical. Like investing $140 million of my own money into experimental fusion storage prototypes while everyone else thought I was delusional. What you might help, Harrington said as he stepped back from the tea, is if we made some introductions. Nothing major, just entry points. Entry points. He wanted to help me secure a junior-level position in an industry where I was, statistically speaking, one of the top 5 innovators under 40. That's very kind, I said, because honestly, it was. We should set up informational interviews, Dad said, practically glowing at the idea. Helps Alexis understand how the industry really works. Understand how the industry really works. I had 12 patents shaping the industry. But yes, let's learn the basics. We had barely made it through 4 holes, and I'd received more unsolicited career guidance than an entire college graduating class. And through all of it, all I could think was how desperately Dad wanted to believe I was okay. He simply had no idea how okay I actually was. Someone who's navigated the business world successfully. That's what Mr. Patel said as we waited for the group ahead to putt. Excellent idea, Dad agreed immediately. Alexis would benefit tremendously from that kind of guidance. A mentor. My board of directors included a former NASA administrator, a Nobel laureate in plasma physics, and the founder of America's largest renewable infrastructure group. But perhaps those weren't the mentors Mr. Patel had in mind. I'd be happy to help, Harrington offered. Start with basics, proper cover letters, interview etiquette, professional presentation. Professional presentation. 2 months ago, I sat on a CNN primetime panel discussing federal energy policy. But yes, maybe I needed help with basic communication skills. And confidence building, Dr. Green added. You've been quiet today. You need to learn to advocate for yourself. Quiet. I was quiet because I was trying to survive a conversation where 3 successful men were giving remedial career advice to someone who had accomplished more in their field than they had in theirs. She's always been reserved, Dad said apologetically, but you're right, she needs to work on self-promotion. Self-promotion. Forbes had just named me one of the top 10 most influential innovators shaping the future of energy. But apparently, I struggled with self-promotion. We reached the 5th tee when Harrington pulled out his phone again. You know what? He said, let me call my buddy. He runs a small renewable consulting agency. Not a huge firm, but perfect for someone just starting out. Starting out. He was about to get me an entry-level job at a company whose entire business model existed because of patents I owned. "That's not necessary," I began. "Nonsense," he cut in. "He's great with young people. Let me just call—" He was actually dialing. The gesture was so genuinely kind and so entirely misdirected that I almost felt guilty stopping him. "Mr. Harrington, really? No need to be nervous," he said reassuringly. "Mark is very approachable." Approachable. Last week, I had dinner with the governor of California to discuss regional energy resilience plans. But sure, let's focus on approachability. "This is exactly what you need, Alexis," Dr. Green added. "Sometimes one person believing in you opens all the doors." One person believing in me. The President of the United States had personally called me to congratulate me on Patel turned the screen toward them. There I was, sitting across from the CNBC anchor during yesterday's live market interview. The headline blazed underneath. "Alexis Monroe, CEO, Fusion X Energy Corp., signs $3.6 billion federal contract." The silence that followed wasn't just silence. It was soul-leaving body silence. Dad's confusion sharpened as he stared at the photo. His eyes flicked from the screen to me, then back again, as if trying to reconcile two incompatible realities. "Yesterday's CNBC interview," Patel read aloud. "CEO Alexis Monroe discusses next-generation fusion storage and multi-billion-dollar federal contract." Harrington blinked hard. "You're the Fusion X CEO from the news? The one who cracked scalable fusion grid storage?" Dr. Green whispered. "The youngest person in history to secure a federal clean tech infrastructure contract," Patel finished. All eyes on me. "Yes," I said simply. "That's me." Dad's golf club slipped from his hands and hit the ground with a loud clatter. "Your father said you were job hunting," Harrington managed. "I didn't say that," I replied gently. "Dad said that." Every pair of eyes swung toward Dad, whose expression looked like someone had unplugged his entire brain. "Alexis, when you said you were working in energy, you meant you own an energy company?" "I founded it," I said quietly. "Built it from nothing over the last 3 years." "3 years," Patel repeated. "The same 3 years your father told us you were figuring out your direction." "I was figuring it out. I just happened to revolutionize fusion storage in the process." Dr. Green frantically scrolled through his phone. "Forbes, 30 under 30, Innovator of the Year, TED Keynote, Nobel Committee preliminary nominee." Dad stared at me, stunned, speechless. "The consulting work?" he asked faintly. "Running a multi-billion-dollar corporation," I clarified. Harrington looked like he might collapse. "I just tried to get you a $48,000 a year junior analyst job?" "It was thoughtful of you," I said sincerely. "Thoughtful?" he sputtered. "I tried to get you an entry-level position at a firm that pays royalty fees to your patents." "It happens," I shrugged. Patel covered his face. "I've been giving career advice to someone who literally shaped the field I was giving advice about." "You told her to be realistic," Dr. Green said slowly. "And modest," Harrington added. "And patient," Patel whispered. "And to build experience," Dad murmured. The irony was almost physically painful. Dad finally spoke again, his voice trembling. "All this time, I thought you were struggling." "I know," I said softly. "I'm sorry. I just got tired of arguing about whether my goals were realistic." "Realistic?" Patel muttered under his breath. "We were telling the CEO of a multi-billion-dollar fusion company to be more realistic about her expectations and to consider entry-level positions in companies that likely license her technology." The three men stared at each other, the weight of collective embarrassment so heavy it could have turned the golf cart into a confession booth. When Mark asks why I hung up on him, Harrington said faintly, "What do I tell him? That I found out the candidate I was trying to help owns the patents his company uses?" "You could explain that politely," I offered with a gentle smile. Dr. Green suddenly erupted in a full, unfiltered laugh. "Bill, you tried to get the founder of Fusion X a $48,000 a year analyst job. It's not funny, Harrington protested, but the smile stretching his face disagreed. It's a little funny, Patel admitted. More than a little, Dr. Green corrected. Dad let out a long, slow breath as if finally accepting the absurdity of the morning. I feel like such a fool, he murmured.
Don't, I said softly. You feel like a father who was worried about his daughter's future. That isn't foolish, that's love. But I've been making excuses for you, he said. For months, to my friends, to everyone. And now, I replied gently, you can tell them your daughter just signed the largest fusion infrastructure contract in U.S. history. Something inside him cracked. Maybe shame, maybe disbelief, but pride slipped through the gap like sunlight after a storm. Dr. Green cleared his throat. Well, the confidence advice we gave you earlier about speaking up wasn't completely wrong. Presentation skills always matter. I agree, I nodded. Your advice isn't useless just because I've reached a certain level. When I was starting out and no one knew who I was, your wisdom would have helped me. Harrington blinked. You're serious? I'm always serious about learning. Success in one area doesn't mean I can't improve in another. Harrington laughed, shaking his head. Alexis, when we were trying to teach you how to be confident in interviews, I was taking mental notes. Patel nodded. That's probably why you've achieved so much, he said thoughtfully. You still listen, even when the advice comes from people who have absolutely no idea they're talking to someone way beyond what they're explaining. That is humbling, admitted Dr. Green. We all stood there, the five of us, surrounded by manicured greens in morning sunlight, soaking in the strangest, most unintentionally comedic career intervention the country club had ever seen. So, what now? Dad asked hesitantly. Do we finish the round? I looked at the four men who had spent their morning trying to help someone they thought was lost, only to discover that person had already climbed farther than any of them realized. I'd love to finish, though maybe we could talk about something other than my employment prospects. Deal, Dad said quickly, though I reserved the right to ask at least one question about fusion storage since, apparently, my daughter's reshaping the future of electricity and I've been too worried about her rent to notice. That's fair, I said, chuckling. As we walked toward the 6T, Harrington fell into step beside me. Alexis, I hope you know, everything we said today came from care. We genuinely wanted to see you succeed. I know, I said honestly, and I'm grateful for that. Even though our advice was laughably off. Your advice wasn't off, I corrected. It was misdirected. But the impulse to help someone succeed, that's never wrong. He smiled, genuine, relieved, still a little embarrassed. Your father raised a gracious daughter. He raised a daughter who understands that successful people lift others up, even when they don't realize how high that person has already climbed. Dad overheard that and stopped walking. His eyes filled with something I hadn't seen in a long time, recognition. Not of the CEO, not of the innovator, not of the public figure. Of me, my daughter. We finished the rest of the round, not as a worried father and a struggling daughter, not as a group of mentors and a supposed mentee, but as a small patchwork family learning maybe, for the first time, to see each other without assumptions. And for the first time in months, Dad walked beside me instead of in front of me. No apologies, no explanations, no embarrassment. Just clarity. Just truth. Just us.